Hello and welcome back to the Get Mental podcast. My name is Dave Matthews, host of the Get Mental podcast here with George Rivers, a really, really amazing guest who's also a part of the Hearts and Minds team. So we have a really unique opportunity to talk to George. George, where's this podcast finding you today?
I am in Houston, Texas, where it is about to hit a 100 degrees today on Memorial Day.
Ooh, absolutely love it, man. It's a hot one out there.
Yeah.
So today we have the guest and honor privilege to introduce George Rivers. George works for Hearts and Minds as a mental coach. He's been in that capacity for about a year, maybe 2 years now so far. And he's originally from, I think you're from the Houston, Texas area, a college athlete, college coach as well. Went to get your master's in psychology. And we could talk all about this to the ends of the earth. But I want to give a brief introduction of George before he takes it off. But George, tell the people who you are, why you're interested in sports psych, and kind of your journey to this moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And, first and foremost, thanks for having me on. I'm super excited to do this and everything and, get the word out about, our profession and everything. But yeah, a little bit about me is a Houston boy, Texas boy, born and raised, and played tennis right from about when I turned about 3 years old and have never really stopped. I'm 31 years old now, so about 28 years of tennis. Like I mentioned, I played collegiately as well. I played at Tyler Junior College and then went on to play at Indiana University in the Big Ten Conference. And that was awesome. Very different experience, leaving Texas for the first time and experiencing the country. So that was awesome. And then I got into college coaching at Trinity University in San Antonio, Texas, which is a D3. Typically ranked top 10. It was, had a lot of success there. It was awesome. And then, went on the path of obtaining my master's in clinical mental health counseling, but with more so of a focus on sports psychology, working with athletes specifically with the unique challenges that they have. There are a lot. And one of my favorite athletic populations to work with, college athletes, which was a big motivation for writing my book.
Thank you, George. That's awesome. And speaking of the book, we could dive right into the book. He wrote a book called The Invisible Weapon, which is kind of a mental skills guide for athletes to kind of figure out some of the mental fitness routines or, high frequency things with some of the latest research. Some really good stories from you in here. You were also a college coach and a college athlete. So I have to digress to the first question that I always ask every guest, which is, if you had to choose between the top 3 mental skills for yourself or for other athletes to adopt, what do you think are the most pivotal 3 mental skills that any athlete should have in their repertoire?
Oh, and that is such a great question. My big 3 are self-talk. Very, very firm believer in that. And my second one is visualizing. And my third is resilience. Just building up resilience, lots of mental resilience, especially in the sports world, is super important.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Would love to dive into that more. How have you seen, pick one. So you talked about self-talk, resiliency, and imagery being those 3 mental skills that are really pivotal. How have you seen those play out in your life or the athletes that you coach?
Yeah, and I see, especially from a coaching perspective, these are some of the big ones that I really like to work with my athletes on. Because, they had just addressed so many different areas in sports. Self-talk, super important. Visualization, building confidence when you're about to go out there, when you're about to compete, being, framed in the mind to be ready. And then just resilience in general of overcoming obstacles, adopting the growth mindset is absolutely huge. And I will say, from a coaching perspective, those are really my big 3. And then personally as well, self-talk is definitely the highest rated one, in my opinion. I have a pretty interesting story to talk about that if you'd like to hear it.
I would, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I've really first started believing in self-talk, so my sophomore year at Tyler Junior College, we were playing for a national championship. And it was a hot day. Like we had a huge rain delay the previous day, so we were trying to fit matches in. All in one day, and it was a whole mess, right? And so I go out there and I played the toughest tennis match ever in my life. It was the semifinals of nationals, and it was 6-4, and it lasted about three and a half hours, which is crazy, absolutely crazy for a match, that didn't go 3 sets, that didn't go all the way, but it was the most physically and mentally draining experience of my entire tennis career. I was in the flow state, which was amazing. My opponent was in the flow state, which was amazing, but not so good for me because, it just made life very difficult. And every single point was just pushed to the max. There were no free points, and it was crazy. And so after the first set, I started cramping up pretty bad. And for all those listening, once you start cramping in one area, it'll usually start spreading to your whole body. And I started cramping in my legs, then it got to my stomach, then my hands. And, by the end of the match, I am like full body cramping. I won the match somehow. I don't know how I did it. Just hit the most amazing shot. I never should have hit it, but I did. It was kind of like one of those last minute attempts to win the match on match point. Drop my racket, start screaming in my hand. Cramps. Couldn't even shake my opponent's hand because my hand was literally cramped with a fist, right? So I get carried off the court. And they like rush me into the locker room. The trainers are putting ice bags on me, trying to get the cramps out. And like I said, there was a huge rain delay the day before. And so I had another doubles match later that evening. And this was a crucial doubles match to help, win the championship. And so I'm sitting there on the table, and my coach, he's like, hey, you have about 1 hour. You have about 1 hour to get ready. We've got to get this figured out. So they try to start pumping electrolytes in me. I'm throwing up all over the place. My mom is literally sitting there feeding me a Subway sandwich because I couldn't sit up. Otherwise, I'd start cramping. Couldn't move my arms, my legs, anything. So I'm like sitting there, tears in my eyes, just like, is this really happening? And being fed a sandwich. And then, as time goes on, about 30, 45 minutes go by, and I'm in no shape to go out there. I mean, it's 100 degrees out. I'm just getting done cramping every time I moved. And I was just I was sitting up at this point, right? And I was just like, all right, I told my parents, I told the trainers, I was like, hey, just put me in the bathroom. I need to go to the bathroom. Just put me in there. And so went in the bathroom, splashed some water in my face. I just looked at myself in the mirror for literally 10 straight minutes because throughout the whole process after the match, I'm thinking to myself, there's no way I can do this. I can't go out there. I can't compete. My body is wrecked. My mind is, I don't know where it's at, so exhausted and just so much fear and just so much doubt. And I couldn't get it together. And then, once my coach said, hey, you got about 15, 20 minutes, so you're on court. I'm like, okay, I got to go to the bathroom. And I just got to talk to myself. People were talking to me and everything. George, you're going to do good, all these things. But I wasn't listening, right? It's being stubborn. And so I'm in the bathroom, just staring at myself in the mirror. And, and I just tell myself, I was like, dude, this is the most important moment of your life. You've literally been working for this for 20 years. I can't, this is a huge opportunity. And I just started repeating things in front of the mirror, like, George, you can do this. George, you can fight. Just really, really encouraging myself, just staring at myself. And then, after a few minutes, I literally started believing it. I completely started believing it. And from that moment on, just my complete attitude changed. My whole mindset changed. I was ready to go. And eventually, the time expired and I was so pumped up. I was going from cramping to jumping up and down, super pumped up. I'm, saying all these things to myself in the mirror in the bathroom. And then, lo and behold, time expired and boom, went back on the court and did well. Did well. So that really, really stuck out to me with self-talk and just how powerful it can be for you as an athlete. Crazy story.
Yeah, that is a wild story. So, I mean, I would absolutely hate to be in that position when it comes to cramping, but definitely been there, right? Like the cramp starts at your calf and then enters into your quadricep and then into your stomach. But I mean, what an incredible story of resilience and kind of how self-talk helped you. I guess, have you ever been there before, or how do you, I guess, think about the mind-body connection when it comes to self-talk? Do you attribute your self-talk to reducing your cramps, or were you still cramping in the process? I guess, what did the self-talk do for you exactly?
Yeah, and I'm a big believer that with the mind-body connection, that in my personal opinion, that sports is about 80% mental and the rest is about 20% physical. And just playing tennis, it's a very grueling sport because you're out there, you don't have a lot of timeouts and stuff, so it could be very, very physical. But over the years, I truly learned that, hey, this is really, really mental. And I've been in so many matches where, I shouldn't have finished, or I didn't think I could keep pushing myself forward. And when I would use self-talk and really encourage myself, and really motivate myself, I found that once the mind started talking, the body followed. And so that really had something that, I saw over my career a very, very long time, just the importance of that mind-body connection. And what the mind says, the body will follow. It's incredible, but the mind is even more incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree with that too. And kind of back that up with there's some really interesting research out there, but even anecdotally speaking about how self-talk can help, or I guess the power of belief. There's a really good book out there. I think it's called The Biology of Belief, which is super interesting, but just says how like our mind comes first and can control a lot of the body, physiological sensations, hormone or endocrine responses within the body as well. And how your mindset, your belief, as well as what you say can extrapolate into physiological sensations. There's also some research specifically with imagery that it kind of made me think of too, like imagining myself flexing my arm. I think that they had, there's a study about individuals in casts and people that were outside of a caste. I think they both were in casts. One group did imagery, the other did not. And they actually saw an increase in musculoskeletal muscle in the forearm of the individuals that were doing the imagery. So you're right. There is a really good mind-body connection there, especially when it comes to self-talk and belief, and how, you can actually talk yourself into, physiological sensations like reducing cramps maybe. And that's a really powerful story on that topic.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's one of the things that whenever I introduce visualizing to some of my clients I work with, especially the guys, I'm like, hey, you guys like big muscles, right? You want to grow muscles? And yeah, of course. I'm like, well, there was a study very similar to one in a cast where they measured people's biceps, and they would have them. They had one set that did absolutely nothing. They measured their biceps, and then they had another test group where every single day for I think it was about 10 to 15 minutes a day, they would visualize doing bicep curls. And they actually found that the group that visualized had bigger biceps at the end. So, that's one of my favorite, draws into like, hey, like, you want to try this? You want to get bigger muscles? Even though we're not working on, building biceps, but you get the idea. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, it's a really good study to, again, show the importance of how the body will follow the mind, right? Where the mind goes, your body follows. And that's true, especially for negative self-talk. Right? If you talk to yourself negatively or you're having a bad game, to your point, you can kind of find yourself not cramping up, but kind of tense, right? Like you're not playing as freely as you could. And so, yeah, self-talk is really powerful. On that note, and especially because you talked about imagery and visualization, self-talk, and then resiliency as well, I guess, how do you coach athletes through doing imagery? Like, is it just imagining myself there, or what, I guess, are your tips or routines surrounding maybe a standard imagery practice that athletes can have?
Yeah. And, just off the cusp, a lot of people think like, okay, it's just simple. I need to take some deep breaths. I need to close my eyes. And I just envision myself playing tennis, or envision myself, shooting hoops, whatever sport it may be. And in all reality, that's what it is. Except you've got to get a little bit more detail, right? You've got to, there so much goes into it. And I always like to work with my athletes on identifying all the senses here. So I was working with an athlete not too long ago, tennis player, recovering from an injury. And they're trying to get back in the swing of things, having a lot of frustrations, due to physical things. So I was like, hey, let's start working on visualizing here a little bit. And so, I have them, laying down, taking deep breaths. And I ran through a transcript with them. And a vast majority of the session wasn't even focused on playing tennis. Believe it or not, it wasn't even focused on hitting at all. It was focused on smelling the things that they would smell when they're training, feeling this type of things that they would feel, such as the wind, the sun on their bodies, feeling just walking around the tennis court, feeling that concrete beneath them, feeling the tennis balls, the racket in their hand, and really focusing on activating all the senses, because that's one of the biggest things with visualization is if you don't bring the senses, you don't bring all that stuff into it, you're not going to get the same effect, and it's not going to be as impactful. So like I said, it's easy. We all daydream, I'm out playing tennis, my eyes closed while I'm at lunch, whatever, but no, it's like you got to bring a lot more things to the table in order to make it super, super effective. So that's a big way that I go about it with my athletes is before we even get into the sports side of it, bringing the senses into it and just really, truly immersing yourself in the environment.
I love that. So engaging all five senses, right? So, and an imagery script, right? Having an imagery script that they can go through. But I guess an athlete, if you're listening to this, could take away from what George just said. It's really just being deliberate, as deliberate as possible, right? Again, utilizing, to your point, all those five senses, thinking really specifically about how the court feels, how your shoes feel. In this case, maybe the racket in your hand. Where are you? What do you hope to do with, maybe a forehand, backhand, whatever it is, and executing that task or skill to perfection, right? That forehand, backhand, serve, whatever it is, just being highly specific and detailed and really just imagining what that would feel like, smell like, sound like, and all of those things, right? So it's more than just, I guess what you're saying is it's more than just imagining myself there and thinking that I'm supremely confident.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And the thing that I tell my athletes the most is, hey, you got to be intentional with this. Just how you're intentional on the court, you got to be intentional with your mental training. And that goes right into visualization. You got to be intentional with everything that you're working through when you're visualizing. So intention, a huge, huge thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And athletes could do this every day, right? They could do it, Monday through Friday, during the weekends, before practice, after practice. Imagery is one of those things that will definitely increase confidence. There's a lot of studies around there surrounding imagery and the importance of it and utilizing it for a routine. I'd like to ask you, who is, I guess, maybe the most influential coach or teammate that you've had as you've come up through the ranks? And I guess, how did they help you in your mental approach to the game?
Absolutely. An awesome question. And the first person that comes to mind sounds cliche, but my dad. He's the one that introduced me to tennis, and he coached me all throughout my career, in juniors and then in college. He'd be one of the first people I call after I won a big match or if I was in a tough spot. And looking back, it's actually pretty funny. He drove me absolutely insane. He would drive me absolutely crazy. And it was from the mental standpoint. So my dad, very positive guy. He's more of a, glass half full type. And, when you're going through sports as a junior and stuff, you're overcoming a lot of obstacles. A lot of things are coming in your way. And my dad would always say, hey, it's about the process. It's about building blocks for the future. When I'm, 12, 13 years old, I'm like, what is this man talking about? I'm not playing with blocks here. The future, I don't even know what I'm having for lunch tomorrow. Like what is he talking about? And I would just get so frustrated and so annoyed with him because he'd always say that we're building blocks for the future. It's part of the process. It's one thing at a time. And I dealt with a lot of injuries throughout my career, and especially at a young age. Oh, it was horrible injuries when I was younger, broken ankles and stuff like that. Not good times. But he would always say hey, this is just a minor setback. You're going to come back even stronger from this. Trust me, you are. And I'd be sitting there with my crutches being like, I can't even move. What are you talking about, man? But that was just his philosophy. And he fully bought into the growth mindset. And once I started getting a little bit older, I started buying into it very heavily and just realizing that, it's not about the moment that you're in right now. Yeah, obviously that's a very important part, but you're always working towards something bigger and better. And you're always working towards, building a solid platform for the future in order to give you success in the future. And nothing comes easy. That was also a very big message from him is, George, nothing is going to come easy, especially in a sport like tennis. Nothing will ever be handed to you just because you're out there training, just as you're out there practicing. It is all part of the process. And he literally started instilling that in my mind from the minute I could walk. From the minute I could walk. He did that with my brother. He did that with my sister as well. She's a nurse in a trauma 1 unit, so she deals with a lot of adversity as well. My brother's an officer in the Marine Corps. And then, there's me, a mental coach as well. And I could confidently say the reason why we're in our professions is because my father and his philosophy on the growth mindset. So when I say that, he is a very, very impactful person for me, yeah, I mean it.
Yeah, I love that. And the support of our parents, I think, can't be underestimated, especially in sport at a young age. And it seems like your dad steered you in the right direction. And obviously, maybe he was probably hard on you as well, right?
Oh, yeah.
Creating resilience or tough skin, and you probably maybe hated him, but obviously that was a story of love, right? And how your dad wanted you to focus on the process, be more growth mindset oriented. I guess for some of our parents and our athletes listening, the parent athlete relationship could be kind of tricky to navigate. It seems like your dad, again, was like that person that was your rock, that was your individual that was really influential to you. But parents and athletes that are listening to this, I guess, describe from your standpoint, what the role of a parent should be within athletics, and kind of, I guess, how your dad emulated that, did it right or wrong, or what any tips do you have for parents out there trying to support their athletes from a mental standpoint, and kind of, again, unlocking that peak performance, because we have these helicopter parents, right? They're kind of all over, or the parents that aren't. And so it's kind of difficult to strike that balance of being fully present, invested, helping, giving praise, but also giving feedback. So I guess what has that been like for you? And how does a parent navigate that?
Yeah, absolutely. And those are some very tough waters to navigate. I saw it from the junior perspective. I saw it from the college perspective as well, and very tough to navigate. And so what I would say with that is the number one thing for the parents out there is realizing, like, hey, it's not your career. Believe it or not, it is not your career. It's your son or your daughter's career, because in all reality, you're not out there playing. You're not stepping into their body, and you're not playing the tennis match. You're not playing the basketball game. You're not running the sprints, all these things. And that's something that I see a lot with parents, is they just get super, super over involved in their child's career. And it does a lot more damage than good. And like, kind of going back to my dad, is he saw that. He was very, very good about that. He let me make my own mistakes. A lot of parents now, they don't let their kids make mistakes. They could be making a mistake in practice or something. I can't tell you how many times I've seen parents literally come out on a tennis court and try to correct their kid. And the coach just stand there like what's going on? It turns into a whole debacle. And that's the big thing, is just, being okay with letting your children fail, letting your athletes fail. That's the best way they're going to learn. It's like, think about like this analogy, right? You've probably heard a million times, don't touch a hot stove. Don't touch a hot stove. And then the one time you actually learn the lesson is when you touch a hot stove. Same exact thing applies in sports. So number one, realizing that, hey, this is not my career. Yeah, I have a very big hand in it. But at the same time, it's really not mine. And then number two is just that support. I mean, there's nothing better than when you come out of a match or a game, and it was a bad one. It was a tough one. And instead of your parents, ripping into you, telling you all the horrible things you did, all these things, all the mistakes, blah, 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 they just said, hey, I'm proud of you. I saw you give it your all out there. I'm proud of you. Like, let's go get food. Let's go home. We can talk about it later. And just being that support, being that rock. And then on the flip side, you win a huge match, you win a tournament, a big game. You come off the court, you want to hear what your parents have to say. You want to hear their support. And it's kind of sad, but I've seen some of the athletes I've worked with, tennis and mental, is they'll win a big match, win a big game. And the second they get off the court, their parents are like, hey, you could have done this better. You could have done that better. I'm just like, oh, whoa. Like, they just had a great result. It's not about perfection here, guys. Just be supportive. Just be there for them, because athletes are vulnerable, especially after a loss. Very, very vulnerable. And, and parents are very impactful. And, and so, along with all that, everything is just being supportive, no matter what happens. I mean, it'd be a very different story if the athlete goes out there, they're not giving 100% and, not doing good things out there with things they can control. But just in general, just being supportive, just being with them, being there for them, it's huge. And one of the biggest things I've seen.
I love that. I think it's solid advice. Again, to recap, number one is it's not your game. And I think that's so big, especially for parents that are kind of out there and they feel like they're actually on the court, right, with their child, or like living vicariously through them. I mean, I think maybe my dad did that a little bit to me, but I definitely know athletes that have, and parents have seen it firsthand, where they have expectations of their kid. And the one thing that I always coach parents on is kind of temper your expectations. Are you verbalizing them? If you're disappointed in how they played, how are you talking to them about it? And so I love that. Again, a mindset that a parent can have is, number one, it's not your match, right? It's not your tennis match. It's not your basketball game. You're not living vicariously through your child. So try to relax, I guess, in that standpoint. And then number two is support, right? Support your kid. I think the number one thing kind of gets mixed up because you want to be supportive. You also want to be passionate. You also probably know that it may not be their career, but you as a parent want it to be their career, maybe. So I guess, how do you steer motivation with those parents that are really, really, and their kid's good, right? Like maybe I'm thinking of soccer. The example that I have is soccer. Kids that are playing soccer right now, you kind of know, especially when you hit 14 years old, if they're going to be really good or not. For those parents that are out there that their kid is kind of on that cusp of being elite, how does a parent be a parent? Do they let the coach? Do they intervene a little bit? Like maybe they're former professional college athletes themselves, which could be even difficult for them. So I don't know, staying on this parent track really quick, what's some maybe advice that you could give a parent in that situation where it's like, hey, I know that it's not, my sport. I'm not living vicariously through my kid, but I want them to be motivated. They're really good. And I'm trying to unlock their motivation, but maybe they just want to sit around and play video games. Maybe they don't fully feel that they can make it professionally yet. Like, how do I, as a parent, navigate that and having my kid, maybe just think more highly of themselves in their sport and motivate them to participate in sports? What's the role of a parent there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and that motivation is so good, is so big, and I think that a parent, like, they need to realize, like, sometimes, like, for example, you have an elite athlete, right? They're, parents are looking at them, coaches are telling them, oh yeah, this person's going to be great, they're going to be so good, all these things and everything, and then yeah, I'm sure as a parent you're like, all right, this is great, especially parents that have had the sports background. You can always tell within a few minutes, and so where I was going with that and everything is, talk about like the motivation, because your first initial instinct would be like, okay, I got to get this kid on a huge training regimen, a huge program. Like, we're going to be doing all these things, blah, 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 just a million things. But at the same time, like, a kid is a kid, right? A kid is a kid. And there's this huge thing called burnout. It's pretty big. It applies across all sports. And in all reality, kids are kids. Their minds aren't fully developed. And so, when you have an elite level kid that's starting to wade into those waters, and parents are trying to get them motivated, trying to do everything for them, and let's say that, they may not be doing some of the things that they should be doing, right? Maybe, like you mentioned, playing some video games, watching TV, and everything. My advice for that is just trying to create a balance, because without balance, it's going to be hard to get results, because in all reality, a 14-year-old kid, they're not a professional. I don't know how many 14-year-old professionals there are. 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 17, start wading into those waters. But at the same time, they still have a life to live. They have a life outside of sports. They have to have an identity outside of sports. And as long as they're not just being couch potatoes and stuff, they're still very seriously engaged in their training and everything, that, let them have that little bit of freedom. Let them have that little bit of relaxation. Because the one thing that you don't want to do is create an imbalance. You don't want to start treating a kid in their teenage years like they are a full-fledged professional. And I see it all the time. Literally, I see it all the time. And it drives me crazy, because I'm like, hey, I love that you're so involved. I love that you're motivated. I love that you want this for your kid and everything. But at the same time, you got to let them live a little bit, And if it's part of the process, if it's in the cards, it's going to work out. Because the harder and harder and harder that you push them when they don't want to be pushed, it's just a recipe for disaster. And that's when it creates that imbalance. And so to the parents out there that, may have the opportunity to have an elite level athlete, you start recognizing that, start seeing the signs, as eager as you may be to turn them into a professional, don't. Create that balance. And that is super, super, super important. And your kids will listen to you a heck of a lot more. They'll do what you say a heck of a lot more. You just got to give them that little bit of freedom and let them be kids. Because in all reality, like I said, percentages are incredibly small. But if they truly are that unique and special, it'll happen. It'll happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. That's very true. And it's really good advice, especially for a parent, is it's going to take that balance, right? And for us, burnout is a very real thing. You always need an off season. Any athlete that I've ever coached, trained, met with, you need an off season. whether you're going to be fully recovered. I mean, obviously you're still a professional athlete or what have you, but you need that. Same thing for the parent, right? A parent needs to parent in a way that unlocks the intrinsic motivation of the athlete. And the intrinsic motivation really is like, is it fun? Right? Is it fun for them to show up and go to practice? Sure, practice is not going to be fun, but pick and choose your battles, because should I force my kid to go to practice today if they don't want to? My answer is probably yes, but it really depends. There's a lot of circumstances kind of surrounding that. And we have to balance having those life lessons through sport, which parents love, right? The value of going to work when you don't want to go to work. I mean, we're adults now. We know that there are some days that I just don't want to go to work, right? But it's a Wednesday, I have to go. It's the same thing with practice, where you're going to have to go to practice and do the things that you don't want to do. And sports is still a choice, right? I'm still not forcing my kid to play. When it comes to adulthood and job and your work, I guess you could say that that's a choice, but it's also kind of not, right? I got to put food on the table. I got to make money. Right?
Yeah,
so
you got to pay the bills.
Show up. Yeah, I know. And I think that parents often forget that. And it's this balance that we're talking about, right? Between mental health and mental fitness, which can sometimes be a stark contrast. And that's one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about in your new book, which is The Invisible Weapon. You go through and you talk a lot about a lot of these mental skills that we're going to talk about today, right? Mental toughness, resiliency, imagery, self-talk, all of confidence. A lot of these things are outlined in your book, and I almost read it as like a guide for athletes, like a beginner's guide for them to pick up the book, talk about like some of these best practices when it comes to mental fitness. But I want to talk to you. How do you balance mental fitness with mental health? Are they the same thing? Are they different? And kind of, I guess, how do you view this on the continuum of, again, mental health versus mental fitness? What are those differences, and kind of what could we expect if we pick up the book?
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of how I designed the book is I wanted to create it because when I was playing in college athletics, and then when I was coaching in college athletics as well, is I saw a lot of things that I did not like. Number one, I saw that there wasn't a lot of resources for college athletes from a mental performance standpoint. I mean, yeah, you may have like a sports psych on staff, but maybe hard to, get into. They'd probably come out and give like the classic, all right, here's my 1 hour spiel on how to be confident, how to be resilient. All right, guys, cool. See you at the beginning of next semester. All right, cool. And a lot of college athletes and a lot of people in general, they struggle in sports. It's hard. All the concepts that are outlined in my book, they address those things. Like you said, kind of like a beginner's introduction to it. And so I didn't feel like there were a lot of resources there from that perspective. But on the flip side as well, talking about mental health in general, that's a very big outlying theme throughout the book, is saying that, hey, it's okay not to feel okay, right? If things aren't going well, I believe, like in my chapter 10, mental health and recovery, the whole chapter is solely dedicated to mental health outside of a sports perspective, because I think that is incredibly important. Because think about it. If you're a college athlete, you're going through so many changes in your life. You're between the ages of 18 and 23. Your brain's developing. You're ending in relationships. You're dealing with school. You're dealing with pressures, all these pressures that you never had in your life. And then you get thrown into them in college. And I can't tell you how many athletes that I've coached, teammates that I've had that have quit teams, that have just completely burned out and everything. And it wasn't even from a mental performance perspective. It was a mental health perspective. And I think that's something that is incredibly overlooked in sports. I mean, throughout the world, it's starting to get a lot better. But I mean, as you know, the sports world is a very different world. And there's a lot of stigmas attached. And I saw that the role that mental health had in athletic success in college was huge, because you had athletes that were mentally healthy, mentally sound, that were good. It just made school easier, made tennis, it made other sports a heck of a lot easier as well, because I'm a firm believer that, the two worlds collide, your personal life and your athletic life. They collide. And if you're not doing too well in one area, you're not going to do so well in the other area. And then, like I mentioned before, it's creating that balance. And so, with the role with mental performance and mental health, I think they go hand in hand 110%. And that's a very big outlying theme throughout the book that I really, really wanted to, get out to people.
Yeah. Thank you. I love that you talked about that, and also that you included that chapter within the book, which is chapter 10, that individuals can kind of pick up and read if they want to, which is, destigmatizing mental health, but also saying that it's not all, I don't know, motivational speaking, right? It's not all about performance and performing at a high level, but there also can be detriments to performance. And one of the things that I talk, and I think that you do too, discuss with athletes is saying like, hey, this is going to be a monumental sacrifice. What are you willing to sacrifice in order to get to where you want to go? And with that statement almost comes this aura of resilience and toughness and bravado and rah, rah, rah. And I think that there are, to your point, we've seen athletes burn out constantly. I've seen it firsthand. It sounds like you've seen it as well. How do we strike that balance, George? Or maybe you could use yourself as an example. How have you struck that balance, or maybe seen that balance be struck elsewhere, so we can kind of prevent burnout and not get to a point where, it's all, I don't know, David Goggins, running every day. And while we need that discipline, and that's great, and I'm not, demeaning David Goggins in any way, shape, or form, and I think that we can learn a lot from him, let's be quite frank, there's also times in which we need to kind of press the brakes, right, and kind of maybe take care of myself or another way. So it's really tough and difficult for high performers to do that. So how do you think that we can strike that balance and not burn out?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And one of the themes that I talk about in the book is actually self-care. So a lot of my background in my master's education was in clinical mental health counseling. And as counselors, they told us, all right, you guys have high-performing jobs. You guys have high-performing jobs. And I kind of saw a lot of parallels between that and playing sports, just a lot of pressures, very high-performing and everything. And they said that the biggest thing that you can do is practice self-care. And I'm like sitting there, like in my intro, the psych classes and stuff. What is self-care? What does that mean? What does that encompass? And they said is, having an activity, having something that you can do for 20 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day, an hour a day, just something that gets your mind off of whatever you're involved in, and something that you thoroughly enjoy doing. I mean, it could be playing a video game. It could be making a paper airplane. I don't know. It could be drawing. I mean, it could be any type of hobby, anything, just to get your mind off of whatever you're working on, whether it be sports, whether it be school, whether it be your job. Because, there's tons and tons of research that goes into self-care. Allowing yourself to have that time every single day that you get to do something that you really, really enjoy, that you really love. That's not that's stress-free, and can just take you out of that super focused, super motivated mindset, even just to give yourself a break. And that's something that I mentioned in the book quite often throughout is, hey, take time every single day for self-care. And then I work with a lot of athletes, obviously. And then, when I was playing, if someone came to me and said, George, you got to have self-care every day, man. You got to spend 30 minutes to an hour doing something that you really love. And my first question would be like, is that productive? Yeah, I'd be like, I don't think that's very productive. How am I getting better at tennis? How am I getting better in life? How am I getting better? That's not productive. I don't feel like I'm making waves here. They're like, no, that's actually the quite opposite. Is you got to let your mind relax. You got to let your body relax, in order to be refreshed and go out there and have that strong mindset. And so that's one of the biggest things that I like to talk to my athletes about is every single day you have to practice self-care. And, I also get hit with a lot of, I don't have time for that. Trust me, you have time. Maybe not so much 15 years ago in my day, but I can't tell you how many athletes sit on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, playing games on their phone, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, let's check out your screen time here for a second. Let's see how long you're on TikTok, how long you're doing this or that. Could you have used that to maybe pick up a book, read a book, do some deep breathing if that's your thing, doing some stretching, whatever it may be, whatever your self-care routine may be. Could you do with that then? 10 times out of 10, they're like, okay, yeah, you got a good point there and everything. But all in all, it's just practicing self-care because it just creates that balance and it gets you out of that high competitive world. And I think that is so, so, so important because think about it. If you're an athlete and you're on 24/7, yeah, you may be feeling good for a while, but burnout's going to happen. It's going to happen. It happens to every athlete. I don't think I've ever come across an athlete that at some point in their career, they haven't been burned out. And that's where I'm like, hey, self-care.
Yeah.
taking care of yourself, literally in the name, it'll benefit you in huge
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think that a lot of athletes can take that to heart, right? Which is, I need to practice self-care. One of the things that is that I read is a book by Csikszentmihalyi that talks about flow, right? And having other opportunities outside of your sport and outside of school to engage in a high flow activity. And what that could look like is actually playing video games. Video games will fully absorb you in that task. And a lot of athletes play a lot of video games. But having a hobby outside of sport that's also enjoyable, I don't mind gaming as one of those things personally. I think that I would categorize that as self-care. The reason that is because it's a high flow activity where you're fully absorbed in the task. You're sitting down, you're often chatting with other people, or maybe you're playing online. So that establishes community, and community is really important, especially for people that are struggling with burnout, is to talk to someone else, right? And have those resources available. Maybe they are your teammates. That's totally fine. Maybe they're your best friend, right? If you're at college or university in California, maybe that's your best friend from, out of state somewhere. Whatever that is, I always talk to athletes and try to tell them exactly what you said, right? Because it is a balance, right, between high striving and not burning ourselves out, and really finding that balance. And I actually want to ask this question because it's also really tough. Maybe you don't have the answer for this, but during the tough days, what keeps you going? And when you feel yourself on the verge of, because I think that some of us mistake burnout from, I don't know, something different. And I think for myself as a high performing athlete, is that like I would push through, right, on those tough days. Now, obviously, you don't want to get injured, and we talk about that a lot. Like, there's a lot of athletes that kind of push through injuries, and that's not the best thing to do. But again, we're talking about the mental side of things for a second, so let's stay there. If I'm dealing with a tough day, and I don't know, how do I know when to switch gears from dig deep and strive forward, or saying, you know what, I think I may be burning out, I'll take an off day? And I know this is a highly subjective question, right? For like what's different for me might be different for you, but like in your practice and as you move forward or have experience in your life of being an athlete, how do I differentiate a tough day where I just need to dig deep and drive forward from a day where I might need some time off and to invest in my self-care?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a really good question. And one of the solutions that I've came up with that has really, really helped me is, it sounds super easy, but literally mandating a day off. Mandating one day out of the week off. Because if you're going 7 days a week for X amount of time, it doesn't matter how good you are, you're going to burn out eventually. The engine's going to fail, plain and simple. But the thing is, for example, my day off is on Sundays. I love Sundays, having it off. I don't know what it is. I just love it. And so bringing it back to the point of, let's say it's a Monday or a Tuesday or a Wednesday or a Thursday or something, and I'm having, one of those days, it's just a bad day. I don't want to work. I don't want to do this. I don't want to push myself, even though I need to and everything. I always think to my day off of like, hey, all right, man, do you want your day off to be today, or do you want your day off to be Sunday? Because I'll tell myself of like, hey, if you don't want to put forth the effort, you don't want to put forth the work today, okay, fine. Let's call it quits today. Let's throw the towel in. Let's go home. Let's do whatever we do on our day off. But Sunday comes around, you're working that day. You're going to put in the time. You're going to put in the work. And you know what? You're already out here. You're already doing what you need to do. You're already in the office. You're already in the court. You're already in the gym. It's like, you know what? Like, don't go after it, at half pace here, because we have our built-in day off where we can do whatever we want, whatever you want. But on the days that it's not your day off, you work, you push. And you know what? And that's kind of a very strange rule that I had of, okay, if I'm, really, really teetering on that edge of burnout and it's like a Tuesday or a Wednesday or something, I'll say, okay, you know what? Let's have the day off today. Or let's tone things down today. And then Sunday, we're just not going to have the day off. Not as like a punishment, but also realizing at the same time, like, okay, maybe today is just one of those days and we all have them. So it's kind of, once again, finding that balance, everything. And I think a lot of that comes into just understanding your limits, your own personal limits. I think that's a huge thing. So like, this works really well for me. because every day, we're adults, man, working, everything. Yeah, every day is pretty tough. There's not a lot of easy days, and it's so easy to just throw the towel in. But I always think in my mind, back in my mind, hey, I got my day off coming up, so I'm going to put forth the work. I put forth the effort, and it gets me through it. It's just that having something, just having I guess you could say a intrinsic reward waiting for me at the end of the week if I put in the work and the effort. So
yeah, I love that. And again, filling that other day off with like some of your hobbies, right? The things that you're doing, and not feeling guilty about it too. Like know that it was a job well done, and it was very awesome to get to that point. Whether it's a Sunday, Monday, whenever your day off is, you feel a lot less guilt, and you could totally change them up, right? Like exactly like you said, you're saying, hey, maybe I'm teetering on burnout right now. I want to take it off. Tuesday is going to be my day off. I just can't do it. But that dedication and having those boundaries that you're reinforcing with yourself to say, hey, I took this day off. It's Tuesday. Now Sunday, I have to work. That is exactly what I have to do. The dedication that it takes and the determination in your mind to make that happen. Because once Sunday comes around, I've done this as well. You've probably done this, right? Where that bed is feeling really comfortable, right? I can't get up. You didn't get all the stuff done. So it's because you flip-flop those days off and you probably gave yourself an out. So don't give yourself that out. But it's, again, balance just keeps coming up in this conversation, George, where it is the balance between high performance and not. One of the things that you said is know your limits, which I find really critical, especially for athletes, because they don't know their limits. And we're trying to test our limits every single day. And David Goggins, I think, kind of has, I don't know if it's a saying that he came up with or maybe somebody else came up with, but he said that when you're totally down, exhausted, and tired, I think he said that you're at 80% or something. I think he said that you have 20% left
in the tank.
Yeah, left in the tank. Yeah. So you've heard this before too.
Yeah, and I'm given my my experiences playing and stuff and everything with tennis being a very physical sport, is I'm a very firm believer in that. Is that there's always something left in the tank, and I can't tell you how many matches I've been a part of, how many matches I've coached where I thought I was down and out. I thought my player was down and out, but they just found something. They could just dig deep. They could just find something, whether it be just pure heart, pure determination, shutting their brain off, whatever it may be. They have something that they can just unlock and boom, just push forward. So I'm honestly a very big believer in that philosophy of that, that there's always something left in the tank. There's always something more that you can do. Always. So yeah.
I love that. And it's true, right? In my experience running track, and a lot of the athletes that are probably listening to this always feel that way, or also feel that way too, where there's is another gear. There's something else that's there that you could tap into. You've felt it before. You've tapped into it before. It's just a matter of getting there and tapping into it. But yeah, this balance is kind of something that you'll constantly come up throughout your life, throughout, your athletic careers. Hey, when do I push through? When do I not? When do I relax? And that's just a gut decision, right? You're going to have to learn what that is, but also be brave enough to take that step, whatever that step is, and just learn, right? It's not a regret if you took an off day and, you're kicking yourself for it. I'm a recovery perfectionist as well. I thought I shouldn't take any off days or, work until, midnight or whatever it was. But actually resting will allow you to be more present come tomorrow, right? You're going to be able to give your best. Look, again, switching gears back to the book, I want to talk about what could athletes expect going through the book. What chapter was like maybe your favorite to write, or do you find most important? Talk to me about the book and what people can expect, as well as what was your favorite takeaway from the book.
Yeah, absolutely. Some things they can expect is when I was starting the process of writing it, I would ask myself, okay, let's fast forward, or let's rewind about 10 years or so. What were some of the things that you would have wanted to know? That if someone came to you and said, hey man, I want you to focus on this, or hey, I want you to buy into this here and everything, like this will truly help you. It'll help you a lot. It'll help you perform better, help you become a better athlete, and then in all reality, becoming a better person. Because like the book is not only for athletes. I've had quite a few people in the corporate world, other professions and stuff reading. They're like, oh yeah, this is completely applicable. But not veering off the path, there is a lot of the concepts are things that I wish I had known, such as Athlete resilience, big one. Motivation, big one. Concentration and focus, confidence, goal setting, dealing with performance anxiety, mental toughness in general, mental health. And then, my most absolute favorite chapter is chapter 7, which focuses on accountability. And I think that, accountability is one of the most important things that a person can learn, and especially an athlete to learn. And so I dive into, a short story in the book that was, literally like it was my freshman year of college. I learned a lot of things at college, and it was a very impactful lesson. And I legitimately changed how I went about in life. Truly bought into the process of accountability and really using that. Me personally, and then when I was a coach, and then now as a mental coach as well. And so that's one of the biggest things that one of the most impactful things in the book is just learning how to be more accountable, because everyone thinks they're accountable until it really gets down to it. For example, like we were talking about the days off, is okay, if I take Tuesday off and my off day is Sunday, but I'm going to work Sunday, are you going to hold yourself accountable to that? Plain and simple. And that's so hard to do. And accountability is one of the hardest lessons an athlete or a person, can learn and actually be able to implement in their daily life. Because in all reality, without accountability, without discipline, you're not going to be good. You're not going to be great. You're just going to be stuck. But if you hold yourself to a higher standard, which a high standard comes from accountability and discipline, yeah, sky's the limit there, guys.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And the accountability chapter is one of the good chapters in the book that I think a lot of athletes can read and understand. And that's one of the things that you can get through sport is, how do I hold myself accountable? Right? Other people can hold me accountable too, but how do I hold myself accountable to wake up, to reach my goals, right? And a lot of that comes through motivation, but also is just dedication, right? Not flipping back and saying, hey, I'm going to do it this day, and then not doing it or not following through. If you commit to something, fully 100% commit. Don't second guess yourself. Don't look back. Go forward and be great. And I really like that. I think that that's awesome. One of the things that popped out to me from the book was chapter 9. In chapter 9, I believe, is entitled Performance Anxiety. Mm-hmm. So it's all about performance anxiety and nerves, especially on the court. You open that chapter with a story about Mardy Fish. So for those of us that don't know, Mardy Fish was a tennis athlete and actually had a anxiety attack on his way to, I believe it was the U.S. Open, if I'm not mistaken.
It's documented on it's actually a documentary on Netflix. That's how it starts out, like him literally going through the panic attack or anxiety attack. And if you're watching it, you'll be like, oh my gosh, like I'm actually feeling the same way here. But on the way to the U.S. Open, full-blown anxiety attack.
What an incredible thing to do. And within the story as well, just to kind of tie a bow on this. So he's in, and I can actually read a quote from this. So I'll take it from here. So the quote was this: I'm a couple hours away from the biggest match of my career, the biggest match of my life. I was just curled up in a ball, trying desperately to figure out how to stop having these thoughts. I am the greatest player of all times to get into the quarterfinal of the U.S. Open. This match I had physically, mentally, and emotionally trained for my entire life. And now on the car ride to Arthur Ashe Stadium, my mind is in a million pieces, he says. Then he goes on to say that my heart is racing, just deep breaths, as well as he's Googling what is an anxiety disorder, panic disorder, mental health. He's listening to talks on YouTube of how to deal with it. How am I going to get through this? And he said that he's desperate. He's really desperate. I think by the end of that story, I think he comes to his senses, so to speak. Or actually, do you remember what was the Netflix documentary and well as what was the end of the story here that you wrote about the book?
He never played the match. It overcame him. He never played the match, never finished it. The biggest, for a lot of people that don't understand tennis, the U.S. Open is one of 4 Grand Slams. It's the great, one of the best tournaments that you can ever play and ever win. And he was playing Roger Federer, if people don't know, the greatest tennis player probably to ever live besides Novak Djokovic, Rafael Nadal, one of the big 3. And so, just set the stage for that. I mean, this is one of the biggest opportunities someone in professional tennis could ever have. And he didn't even play because just so overcome with just anxiety and stress, pressure, and all those things that led to him not even playing.
It's such an amazing story that he couldn't even, pull himself to actually do it. And my heart goes out to him. I think that we've all been here before in certain respects, whether we're giving a presentation or playing a game, whatever it is, just to have so much built up anxiety when it comes to the pressure moments, and dealing with those is really tough. So I guess, George, what are some things that we can do as athletes, as high performers, to get to deal with some of those anxieties, right? Like, again, it was crippling anxiety. And I do want to distinguish mental health and this being kind of a full-blown panic attack from mental fitness, which is coaching. And obviously we are psychology nerds as well as gone to school, but we aren't licensed, and this isn't a counseling session. So I just want to preface that right away. So please don't use any of this advice in place of, please seek out professional help. Obviously, just want to give that disclaimer. But George, with that being said, though, what are some things that individuals can do to try to decrease some of this anxiety to kind of, go forward and actually perform?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And if anyone's ever experienced that performance anxiety, oh, it's a killer, because your mind is roaring at 1,000,000 miles an hour. You're thinking of a million things, and odds are you're thinking about winning. You're not thinking about crossing the finish line. You're thinking about failing. You're thinking about doing something bad out there. You're thinking about making errors. Your mind is jumping to the worst possible conclusions. And I mean, that's where anxiety comes from. No one has anxiety from positivity. I mean, I've been in the profession a while, and I don't think I've ever come across something like that. It's someone getting anxious from being too happy. I don't know. Yeah, I'm kind of curious now, but I highly doubt that. Anyways, I digress. But one of the biggest things that I like to tell athletes to do, and it's the most simple thing, is breathe. Is the first thing that you can do is just deep breathe. Just being able to sit down, turning yourself away from other people, going to the bathroom like I did when I was trying to get my mind and my body right to go out there. It's just taking that time just to deep breathe. And there's lots of different deep breathing patterns. There's lots of different methods. I've quite a few actually outlined in the book: the box method, the circle method, visualizing, your breath going in and out around squares, circles, objects, anything like that to try and detract away from the anxiety. So the first thing I say is, number one, deep breathe. And because it just calms your body down, calms your mind down. We've talked about the mind-body connection here today. And then the second thing is confronting that anxiety head on, confronting it, and then reframing it. So for example, let's say, you're going out before the biggest match of your life. Some of the thoughts you may be having: I'm going to fail. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that, blah, blah. Like, I can't do this. That's a big one that I used to have when I played. I can't do this. But an athlete, and I detail it in the book as well, in the chapter, but an athlete coming head to head with those thoughts of, okay, I can't do this, for example, right? I'm not ready for this, is saying like, okay, in all reality, what's the evidence here? Like, what's saying I can't do this? Like, what's saying I shouldn't be in this moment? I don't deserve this moment. What is saying that? Odds are you're probably not going to find a lot of evidence. Or you may find evidence, but it may not be strong evidence. And then taking that knowledge and then moving forward of, okay, how can I reframe my thoughts from I can't do this? I can do this. I'm not feeling ready for this. I am feeling ready for this. I have trained so hard for this. I've trained for 5 years for this, for my whole life for this. I am ready for this. And going back to that self-talk is, reframing your mind, is confronting those anxious thoughts and feelings head on, looking for evidence that, okay, what is supporting this? Okay, there's not a lot of sufficient evidence supporting this. Okay, how can I turn this into something more positive, something more productive? And then, moving forward with that. And believe it or not, it sounds super, it doesn't sound like, oh my gosh, like this is the recipe for success, all these things. But yeah, it's incredibly simple, but it works. A lot of things in mental coaching, sports psychology, you think that, there's these crazy formulas and all these things, blah, blah. It's like, no, something as simple as just deep breathing and reframing some thoughts in your mind. That's it. And it's, pretty detailed in the book there.
Yeah, I love that. And it is, right? It's outlined in the book as well. And one of the reasons that this works, right, to George's point, is when you're breathing, or at least I've heard and kind of done some research on, is it decreases the stress response from
Cortisol.
our like actual physiology, right? And our nervous system kind of goes into from fight or flight to down to rest and digest. While that could be really beneficial for us to do because it is this like physical manifestation, another thing that I've heard also is when you have a lot of performance anxiety, and I'm talking about crippling performance anxiety to the point where you don't want to step on the court, right? There's a lot of things going on. I actually go for a run. It helps me when I am really anxious, because what anxiety kind of is, your heart rate's going to go up, you're going to start to sweat, your thoughts are going to start to race. You kind of want to get some of that energy out, right? Because your body is like very, very energized. And so I actually go for a run, and sometimes this helps, sometimes this doesn't. Obviously, this is not like a clinical thing to do like any, this is just some advice that's worked for me, is to just kind of go for a run. And what happens after that, and I know that you have a match, right? Whether it be tennis, basketball, volleyball, whatever sport you're playing, I know that that's the case. And you don't want to run because you want to conserve your energy, but your anxiety is so high. Hop on a bike, stationary bike, go for a run, whatever it is, take a cold shower, and maybe that might help kind of decrease that. But that's helped me. And really it is just kind of getting some of that energy out, right? Because it's a very energetic thing to feel like anxiety is. And so getting some of that energy out may help you then go into some of these deep breathing techniques. And one of the things I love that you highlight in the book also is just surrounding like why we feel performance anxiety. And one of those two that I like, one is high expectations. And this is really pivotal, right? It's the expectations of myself and the expectations that are placed on me through other people. Those expectations can come from your coach. It could come from, it's your family. It could come from people on Twitter, Instagram, wherever it comes from, these high expectations that us as athletes deal with. They can be placed on us. And there's one key. You have to internalize them, right? If you believe them, then they start to creep in as anxieties for us. But if we disregard them as not important, then maybe not. One of the things that has helped me also is to talk to that person, right? Like I would talk to my dad and I'd say, Dad, I have this expectation in my head that you want me to win this race or run in a certain time. Is that true? And sometimes it was, but sometimes it wasn't. He said, no, I just want you to go out there and do your best. Right? And I would just tell him, hey, I have this unrealistic expectation of myself that I should run whatever it is, 21-second, 200-meter dash, whatever it is. Right? Going up to that person, whether it be your coach or et cetera. Now, this could backfire. They could also say yes. But sometimes they say, no, I'm not expecting you to go out there. And for, Marty, maybe he was expecting himself to go out there and win, right? Maybe that was the expectation. And yeah, we should expect that from ourselves. However, playing the best person in the world at that time, George, to your point, it's kind of this like, yeah, the odds are stacked against you. You might not win. And then is that okay? Right? Is maybe the expectation there was, it's not okay if I go out there and have, a poor match. Right? That's wrong. That's not what I should do. That's not what should happen. Every opportunity that you step on the court is a learning experience. And the stage was just too big. So I love that. I love that advice, George.
Absolutely. And yeah, absolutely. And high expectations, they're good, but if they're not realistic, they're dream killers. And actually go into that in goal setting as well in my book. A really good chapter strictly on goal setting, how to set the best goals for yourself, realistic goals, because so many people have unrealistic goals. In all reality, they do. And hey, I love that you're so motivated. I love it. I love it. But at the same time, it's like, okay, maybe this isn't the time for this specific goal. So for example, you're talking to a 12-year-old and they're like, yeah, my goal is to be a professional by the time I'm 18. It's kind of like, okay, it can happen. Don't get me wrong. It can happen. But at the same time, like, let's bring percentages into it, right? There's this thing called college that you go to for 4 years. And there's a lot of good resources and training in there and a lot of good competition. So who knows? You could turn professional at 22, at 23. But, just kind of, just understanding, what's realistic and what's not realistic is a huge ingredient in the formula.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. Which, again, expectations that can plague us, especially if we go into it. Yeah, we should have a goal, right? Maybe it's to only commit so many faults, or only, go 50% from the field, or whatever our goal is. You should probably have that. But there's also the goal that, hey, if I don't hit that mark, it's a learning opportunity. How can I grow through this and hit that mark next time? It's not a complete and utter failure, right, in your mind, because if you create that in your mind, those boundaries, that expectation, and it's overly rigid, then it can result in, kind of just not realistic expectations, right, or lack of growth for that standpoint too. I want to kind of tie a bow on this conversation and say, George, if there was a podcast guest that you have on, or sorry, let me reframe that. If there's a question that a podcaster should ask you, or a question that I haven't asked you yet that you're dying to talk about, what would that question be, and what's the topic?
No, that's actually that's actually a pretty good question. That's actually a good question. I guess maybe if someone were to ask me, what got you into this field? What got you into this field? What gives you that desire to just work with athletes? But actually I get asked that a lot outside of the podcast of why sports, why athletics and everything. And one thing, and especially but with talking to parents or people that don't play sports, is I said, hey, sports is one of the best vehicles to help you find success in life. What do you mean by that? I'm like, well, you learn so many principles, you learn so many lessons, you learn so many ideas, you learn so many different philosophies. Sports has just such a huge impact on you as a person, and how you develop as a person, is you learn so many different skills, quite a few skills that I wrote about in my book. And that's what shapes you as a player and then also a person. And that's where I found my true passion, is working with athletes. Because like I mentioned, I had my background in counseling. Yeah, it was awesome. Loved working with regular people, going through challenges and, regular everyday life and everything. But at the same time, I'm like, man, I'm an athlete, grew up playing sports, and I just felt like my calling was to be there for athletes in that sense, in an athletic perspective. And so that's what really, truly, drives me to be the best mental coach, psychologist that I can be. Because I've seen it, I've lived it, that the lessons that you learn in sports carry over into life. And if I have a role in developing someone as a great person, because in all reality, Dave, it sounds bad, kind of contradictory towards my profession, but I don't care if you're a good athlete. I mean, I do care, obviously. I do care that you're a good athlete. But at the same time, if you're not a better person after working with me, working with Hearts and Minds, then we failed in our mission. Because being an athlete is only one part of the equation in life. That's only one part of the equation. And so that's where, so much of my desire, my motivation, and everything to be successful in my career and to work specifically with athletes comes from. Is because I'm in the business of helping people, making people greater people, not just athletes. And so that's one of my favorite things to talk about with people. And, all honesty, want to get that message out there, not just for myself, but also for the Hearts and Minds brand that we work for and everything. So that's a very strong principle, guiding principle in our philosophies. So, yeah.
I love that, man. Yeah. So we're building character, right? That's kind of what we're doing. It's the discipline, it's the confidence, it's the mental toughness, the resiliency. That's such a transferable skill. They're so transferable. And to your point, we care about your athletic endeavors. We absolutely do. I want you to hit the highest pinnacle that you could hit, whether you're standing on the Olympic podium, accepting the gold medal, or whether you are, crushing it at beach volleyball, having fun with your teammates or what have you, whether you're going to state championships, whether you're getting an athletic scholarship, all that's great. But it's also building those individuals, the characters, the strengths of your character, right? And how we kind of mature as individuals, right? And internalize some of the poor experiences in life, but also the great ones as well. And it really is a breeding ground for that. Absolutely love that. So, George, this is our lightning round. It's how we close out every podcast. So I'd love to invite you to it today. Just answer these questions with the first seed of the thought that pops into your mind. Cool?
Got it.
All right, awesome. So, George, what is your favorite food?
Mexican food.
Oof. Love that. Yes, makes food's fantastic. When you're frustrated, what do you do?
I pray.
Well, love that. Yeah. A nice prayer practice, especially when it comes to spirituality, is monumentally important, right? Kind of just knowing where your values are and just recentering yourself into whatever moment that you just came from into what really matters. Man,
Absolutely.
What's an underestimated part of your routine?
Ooh, organization.
Ooh,
Organization. So I am. So I once I figured out, as I started to get a lot older, started noticing the importance of routines, not only in sports but also in life. Growing up, I was all over the place. It was not good. And then, my dad, brings me a notebook and he's like, "Hey man, okay, you know what? You're gonna start creating routines every day. From the second you wake up till you go to sleep, you're gonna have routines throughout the day." And you're also going to have stability throughout the day. Because I really, really struggled with that. And organization was a huge thing in that. Everything, just keeping everything organized, just keeping everything where it should be, not from a physical standpoint, but from also, like a work standpoint as well, and everything. So organization goes along a lot of different things, but that's a huge, huge thing in my routine that works really, really well for me, especially now.
Yeah, I love that. You really can't underestimate that. I mean, just having the organization of knowing where things are, having the organization of knowing what my routine is, right? This like kind of if-then statement. We actually bring athletes through this as well. That's kind of why I referred to it. We're joking about it. But, if this happens, then what will I do? And it seems that you are so deliberate in the organization of not only where things were physically, but what you're going to do. Like if there's free time or cancellation at 3:00 or whatever, if this happens, then I will, go work out or do some research or read this book, whatever it is. And so, yeah, having that's a pretty underestimated part of a routine is just being highly organized. And there's a lot of websites too that you can put in to kind of help with some of your organizational skills. Notion is one of them. I use Notion a lot too, especially when it comes to being organized, but highly organized people are probably highly organized minds as well. So that's awesome. George, thank you so much. Where could we find you, whether it be social media? Are you accepting new athletes still for your mental skills, mental fitness consulting? Are we still accepting athletes?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. One-on-ones are open, accepting new athletes. So the best ways that you can find me is my Instagram, griversport. And also my HM Perform email, george@hmperform.com. I am also on Facebook, not on Twitter, but Instagram. You can always reach out, slide the DMs. Same with Facebook. And then also my email as well. And you can also find my information and contacts on our website, hmperform.com.
Amazing. Yeah, amazing. And shameless plug, pick up the new book that George wrote. Specifically about mental fitness, which was The Invisible Weapon. Pick that up. I think there's an Amazon link. Is that not in the website also, I think?
Oh yeah, it's on our website, on my socials as well. And if you just Google search The Invisible Weapon, it'll pop up on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and quite a few other sources as well. So, but probably easiest Amazon because it gets there in like a couple days. So, yep.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, Amazon 2-day shipping.
Perfect.
Obviously. Well, George, thank you so much for coming on to the Get Mental podcast. I really appreciate it. This has been a phenomenal episode. Go pick up that new book from George. It's out now wherever books are sold. George, any last words?
Any last parting words is, guys, take care of your mind and the body will follow. Take care of the mind, the body will follow, because in all reality, your most valuable weapon is your mind. It's your most valuable weapon, and it's invisible. Hence the book. But in all seriousness, though, is sharpen your most valuable weapon that you have on the field or the court. It's your mind, because your body can only take you so far. It's what your mind does. It's what your mind does. And your mind is up to pushing you past your own limits. So, sharpening the most valuable weapon you have, your mind.
Yeah, it is. It is why we got into this in the first place, right? The body can only take you so far. It's the mind that gets you up in the morning, that gets you to the gym. That can have you lock in when you're kind of just not feeling it, right? So love this mental weapon, The Invisible Weapon. the most valuable mental skills that we can have, all in the book. Really love it. Short read too, very simple.
Yeah,
absolutely. George, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Have an incredible rest of your day. And
absolutely.
for us at the Get Mental podcast, we are out. I'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you so much.